There was a time when customizing your desktop meant changing the wallpaper, maybe switching from light mode to dark mode, and calling it a day. On most operating systems, that's still what customization looks like. A theme here. A taskbar tweak there. Maybe some rounded corners in the next update if you're lucky. But in the Linux world, something very different has happened. Customization hasn't just evolved, it has exploded. And somehow, instead of breaking everything, it has created one of the most creative, expressive, and powerful desktop ecosystems in modern computing. Linux desktop customization is out of control, in the best possible way. To understand why, you have to understand what makes Linux fundamentally different. Unlike Windows or macOS, Linux isn't a single product controlled by one company. It's a foundation, a kernel, a base layer that different communities build upon. And because of that, the desktop environment, the part you actually see and interact with, is completely modular, swappable, replaceable, reinventable. On Windows, you get Windows. On macOS, you get macOS. On Linux, you get choices. You can run GNOME, you can run KDE Plasma. You can run XFCE, you can run Cinnamon. You can even build your own environment from a window manager like i3, Hyprland, or Awesome, and piece everything together manually. And each one of these isn't just a different skin. It's a completely different philosophy of how a desktop should behave. That's where things start to spiral, in a good way. Take KDE Plasma, for example. It's often described as the most customizable mainstream desktop environment available anywhere, and that's not an exaggeration. You can move panels anywhere, you can add multiple panels, you can float them, auto-hide them, resize them to the pixel, change icon themes, cursor themes, window decorations, animations, blur strength, transparency, fonts, spacing, layout behavior, virtual desktop behavior, shortcut logic, window rules, and that's just scratching the surface. You don't just change how it looks. You change how it thinks. Want macOS-style global menus? Done. Want a Windows 11-style centered taskbar? Easy. Want something that looks like a futuristic cyberpunk control panel? Absolutely. And the wild part? You can do all of this without installing third-party hacks. Most of it is built directly into the environment. Then there's GNOME, which traditionally leaned toward minimalism and opinionated design. For a while, people criticized it for being less customizable. But the community did what the Linux community always does. It adapted. GNOME extensions became an entire ecosystem of their own. Want a dock? Add it. Want advanced tiling? Extension. Want to tweak animations? Extension. Want blur, rounded corners, advanced workspace behavior? Extension. Suddenly, GNOME wasn't limited. It was modular. And that modularity is what has pushed Linux customization into overdrive. Now enter the rise of tiling window managers. This is where things stop looking like traditional desktops entirely. Tools like i3, Sway, and Hyprland don't just let you move windows around. They enforce structure. Every window tiles automatically. Every action is keyboard-driven. Every movement is intentional. And here's the crazy part. People don't just use them for efficiency. They turn them into art. If you've spent any time browsing Linux communities online, especially places like r/Unixborn, you've seen it. Entire desktops transformed into minimalist monochrome command centers, neon-glowing cyberpunk dashboards, ultra-clean productivity layouts with carefully chosen fonts and perfectly aligned widgets, animated wallpapers flowing behind semi-transparent terminals. System monitors embedded directly into the desktop with real-time CPU graphs that look like something out of a sci-fi movie. These setups are called rices, a term borrowed from car culture. And ricking isn't just tweaking, it's crafting. People share dot files, configuration files that define every aspect of their setup. You can download someone's entire aesthetic and recreate it on your own machine. But most people don't stop there. They modify it, refine it, personalize it. It becomes a digital fingerprint. And this culture of sharing has accelerated everything. 10 years ago, building a heavily customized Linux desktop required serious patience. You had to read documentation, edit config files manually, troubleshoot constantly. Today, while that path still exists for enthusiasts, the barrier to entry is dramatically lower. Theme stores are integrated into desktop environments. KDE has a built-in Get New Stuff button that pulls directly from community repositories. Icon packs, cursor themes, window decorations, all installable in seconds. Even dynamic theming has become mainstream. Tools can now automatically generate your entire system color scheme based on your wallpaper. Change your background image, and your terminal, panels, notifications, and app accents all shift to match. It feels cohesive, intentional, alive. And then there's Wayland. The transition from X11 to Wayland has unlocked smoother animations, better scaling on high DPI displays, improved security, and new visual possibilities. Hyprland, in particular, has become almost synonymous with the next-generation Linux desktop aesthetic. Windows glide into place. Workspaces slide fluidly. Transparency and blur effects look modern and polished. It doesn't feel like a hobbyist project anymore. It feels futuristic. What's fascinating is that this explosion of customization hasn't made Linux chaotic in a negative way. It hasn't fractured the community beyond repair. Instead, it's created niches, subcultures. Some users prefer ultra-minimal setups with no icons and a single terminal window. Others build visually rich desktops that rival or surpass commercial operating systems in polish. And both are valid. This is the key difference. Linux doesn't force a single design language onto millions of users. It invites experimentation. If you don't like something, you can replace it. If you don't like the replacement, you can build your own. That freedom has attracted a new generation of users who see their desktop not just as a tool, but as a canvas. Content creators now build entire YouTube channels around Linux customization, setup tours, theme showcases, tiling workflow tutorials, performance comparisons between compositors. The aesthetic has become part of the identity. A well-crafted Linux desktop isn't just functional, it's expressive. And here's where it gets really interesting. Customization isn't just visual. Under the surface, Linux allows deep behavioral changes. You can script window rules so that specific applications always open on certain workspaces. You can bind complex multi-step commands to single keystrokes. You can automate layout changes depending on which monitor is connected. You can alter how your system allocates resources. You can build keyboard-driven workflows that eliminate mouse usage almost entirely. This isn't just about pretty panels. It's about designing your own operating experience. Compare that to Windows. Yes, Windows 11 has improved visually. It introduced rounded corners, a center taskbar, improved window snapping. But at its core, you're still operating within strict boundaries. You can't fundamentally change the desktop paradigm without unsupported third-party tools. You can't swap out the entire shell. You can't rebuild the window manager from scratch. On Linux, you can. And because you can, people do. Now, of course, there's a downside to unlimited customization, choice paralysis. New users sometimes install Linux expecting a polished, ready-made experience and are overwhelmed by the number of distributions and desktop environments available. Ubuntu, Fedora, Arch, Debian, OpenSUSE, each with multiple desktop options. Each with slightly different defaults. But here's the twist. Modern distributions have recognized this problem. Many now ship with beautifully curated default setups that require zero tweaking. Fedora's GNOME implementation feels cohesive and modern. KDE Neon showcases Plasma at its best. Linux Mint provides a familiar, stable Cinnamon desktop for users transitioning from Windows. Customization is optional, not mandatory. That's why it's out of control in a good way. The power exists, but it doesn't demand to be used. For power users, the ceiling is practically infinite. For casual users, the floor is higher than ever. You can install a distro and never touch a config file. Or you can spend weeks perfecting your setup down to the pixel. Another reason this explosion has been positive is hardware diversity. Linux runs on everything from decade-old laptops to cutting-edge gaming rigs. Customization allows users to optimize for their hardware. On older systems, lightweight environments like XFCE or LXQT provide speed and efficiency. On high-end GPUs, compositors can enable smooth animations and visual effects without performance penalties. The desktop adapts to the machine, not the other way around. And then there's community documentation. Wikis, forums, GitHub repositories, YouTube tutorials. The knowledge base around Linux customization has grown enormously. If you want to build a Hyprland setup with animated workspace transitions and integrated system widgets, there are step-by-step guides. If you want to replicate a macOS-like environment on KDE, someone has already documented the exact settings. The barrier isn't knowledge anymore. It's curiosity. We're also seeing cross-pollination of ideas. Features pioneered in Linux environments often influence mainstream systems. Advanced tiling window management, once considered niche, is now appearing in Windows through PowerToys and in macOS through third-party tools. Dynamic theming and transparency effects have become industry standards. Linux experiments at the edge and the industry follows. But perhaps the most underrated aspect of this customization explosion is psychological. When you build your own desktop environment, you feel ownership. You understand how it works. You know where the config files live. You know which services are running. You're not just using a system. You're collaborating with it. That relationship changes how you approach computing. Instead of passively accepting updates and design changes, you actively shape your environment. If an update alters behavior you don't like, you can modify it, or revert it, or switch entirely. That level of control is rare in modern technology. And yet, despite all this power, Linux desktops in 2026 don't feel unstable or experimental in the way they once did. Wayland has matured significantly. Desktop environments are polished. Gaming performance has improved thanks to Proton and driver support. High DPI scaling is reliable. Multi-monitor setups are smoother. Customization no longer means sacrificing usability. In fact, for many users, it enhances it. Developers create distraction-free coding environments with automatic tiling and keyboard-driven workflows. Designers craft visually cohesive systems that match their creative identity. Content creators design desktops that look stunning on camera. Even casual users enjoy being able to tweak fonts, colors, and layouts without registry edits or system hacks. And because Linux is open source, improvements spread. When one project develops a great feature, others can adopt similar concepts. Innovation compounds. Of course, there will always be debates. Some argue that too much customization fragments design standards. Others believe opinionated desktops provide better consistency. And that tension is healthy. It pushes projects to refine their defaults while still exposing advanced options. But the core truth remains. Linux desktop customization is thriving. It's not just about changing icons anymore. It's about redefining what a desktop can be. In a world where many operating systems are converging toward lockdown ecosystems and controlled app stores, Linux stands apart. It says, here's the foundation. Build what you want. And people have taken that invitation seriously. They've built minimalist command centers. They've built vibrant, animated digital art spaces. They've built ultra-efficient productivity machines. They've built nostalgia-driven Windows XP recreations. They've built macOS clones. They've built something entirely new. The result isn't chaos. It's diversity. And maybe that's the real reason it feels out of control in a good way. Not because it's messy, but because it's alive. The Linux desktop isn't a static product. It's an evolving ecosystem shaped by millions of users. Every config file tweak, every new theme, every compositor experiment adds to a collective wave of creativity. So when someone says Linux customization has gone too far, maybe that's the point. It went further than anyone expected. And instead of collapsing under its own complexity, it flourished. It became a playground for ideas. A laboratory for interface design. A canvas for personal expression. And a reminder that computing doesn't have to be one size fits all. Linux desktop customization is out of control. And that might be the best thing that ever happened to it.